Member for Laventille West.
Madam Speaker, before we took the adjournment, I was making the point that we are going to treat with this matter of the need, the critical need for improving this service and the delivery of that service to the people. In this regard, the Ministry has completed its review of the draft of the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Bill 2016, and I was scheduled to go before the LRC today at 1:30 to treat with it. I am here. I do not enjoy the gift of bilocation. Neither does the Attorney General, so we will do so, I suspect, on Wednesday of this week, but we are getting on with the people's business. The highlights of this bill will be the creation of a motor vehicle authority, and the authority will be able to manage its own staff, improve business efficiency, and embrace modern technologies. It will require the registration and oversight by the authority of all fleet management facilities operating in Trinidad and Tobago, motor vehicle rental agencies, regulation of vehicle inspection centers, regulation of driving schools, management of maxi-taxi and taxi services. You must agree, Madam Speaker, a very comprehensive approach to dealing with the question of licensing authority, traditionally those issues. We will be introducing tagging of all vehicles entering Trinidad and Tobago, and that will deal with some of the issues of stolen vehicles. And some stolen vehicles stolen from abroad, are registered in Trinidad and Tobago and become, if you like, sanitized that way, laundered in our registration system. That is one of the things we have to deal with. In that regard, I want to say frankly here today, it could hardly happen without complicity on the part of staff of the government of Trinidad and Tobago in those departments. And I want to warn my fellow citizens who work in the transport division, who will be working in the motor vehicle authority, do not be tainted, do not be swayed by blandishments of other people. Keep your integrity about you. You prayed to God. You fought for your job. Now you have it. Do not put it at risk because somebody comes and offers you some minor blandishment. I ask the young people, right now we have some matters under investigation. They have been put in the hands of the police, and the chips will fall where they may in this regard. But I want to warn the young people of this country who might fall prey to those blandishments. We propose as well to improve revenue generating capacities and incorporating corporate governance best practice. The ministry, my ministry, is currently finalizing legislation to introduce modern technologies for the detection of driving offences. For example, before the end of this year, we'll be coming to Parliament with legislation to deal with the red light camera systems, where we will pick you up if you breach a red light, and you will get a love letter in the mail, as happens in England, in America, many states, and Canada, and around the world. We already have a couple of cameras around the place doing the work, so the technology is in place. The legislation is coming soon, and the people of Trinidad and Tobago will be better served in that way. With that technology, certain things will happen to assist in the management of crime in this country as well. We are now in the process of training 40 new licensing officers, as they are now called. Previously, just about 15 of them did a lot of work in this country. We are now, thanks to the Public Service Commission, they have just recruited 40, and they are now being trained at the Police Training College. They will be trained to deal with the issues that is in front of them. And the licensing authority and the commissioner will be training police officers who interface with citizens out there who produce driver's permits. Sometimes the police, not so au courant with these, may not detect easily a false permit, and false permits there are. I have a copy of, and I don't want to reveal it because this too is the subject of a police investigation, but I have two copies, or two photocopies, or images, let me put it more accurately, as a lawyer must. I have two images of driver's permits for the same person, with the same picture, with completely different data in the atmosphere. That is happening regularly in this country. That matter is now gaining the attention of the police and the operator. And the operators of this dark and dirty scheme will soon be found out. In fact, already found out, but will soon be brought to justice. So again, I want to warn the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, crime and dishonesty never pays. somebody's going to get you. And the little money will be of little value when that happens. Saw last week a young man who made 15 years in jail. He has sworn, and I believe him, and I admire him, and I love him, and I respect him. He has sworn, notwithstanding all the temptations. He has tried to get work since he came out of prison. Nobody wants to employ him, but he's promised us in public he will not touch anybody's thing. He's going to pray and find work. Now, I don't want too many citizens having to live what he has lived. He did his wrong, he went to jail, but he's now in a spot of bother. I'm calling on the young people working in the state system, licensing office and otherwise, be careful. Don't put too much at risk. Don't put anything at risk. It's not worth it. So, Madam Speaker, those are some of the things that we propose to do. We have been plagued by a shortage of licensing officers, and as I said, 40 are being trained as we speak. One of the problems of the licensing office is that most of the important transactions, most of the transactions has to be signed by a licensing officer. They were few in number, they have to be out on the streets. That created a backlog, and the service was inefficient. This 40 new officers and more as necessary will improve that situation. I have already alluded to the fact that I will not try to hide from the fact that the Transport Division is a hotbed of some elements of corruption, and we are working hard with those who are minded to do so to trying to improve that. A lot of touting takes place. There have been long delays. People have to wait 2 weeks or more to obtain a certified copy for a vehicle, and that wait gives a window of opportunity for corruption, because somebody working in there tells the hapless citizen, I could get it for you tomorrow, and the citizen is prepared to go and get his loan for his car or what have you from a credit union, from a bank. He's prepared to pay a little bribe for that. I want the citizens of this country to know right now we have the capacity and we are delivering certified copies in 1 day. And you don't have to spend any unnecessary money for that. And I understand people are still telling the public you have to wait 2 weeks. That's not the truth. You can get it in 1 day and cut out that nonsense. Madam Speaker, I want to inform this House for the record that there are about 850, there are on record as we speak, 854,337 vehicles registered in the Transports Division's database. There are about 25,000 that we are now trying to find the records for and to scan into that system, similar to what the Barrington Group was trying to accord. That system with trustworthy and credible information in a database is critical to the management of all of this. It is critical to dealing with crime, because motor vehicles are used significantly in the commission of a host of other crimes. And if we could treat with that, we'll do well. We didn't have to spend no 269 million on no building. We are now in a position where we are building this database. We need 25,000 more of the vehicles that are in the atmosphere. We are putting them on the system, and shortly we'll be able to make this system available at the use of a credit card or a links card or so at different points around the country for the benefit of the citizens. That was what the whole Barrington plan was about. But they, my friends on the other side, didn't see it so beautifully. They spoilt it. Today we owe Barrington money. We have to pay more if we have to continue. But this ministry is working to rectify that as the situation now stands. Insofar as the licensing of vehicles are concerned, the last time I spoke here, I proudly said, I quoted a letter that was written to me about the Transport Commissioner and his division, Mr. Richards, where Mr. Philip Naggs, one of the importers, commended them for the swift capacity to license motor vehicles, and we are continuing on that process. We are now introducing the computerization of the registration process in respect of roll-on, roll-off vehicles, something that we alluded to in the debate here today. And we are moving swiftly towards electronic-based regulation testing. You see the regulations that every citizen must do and pass in order to get on to a driver's permit, Madam Speaker. There's a human element correcting those tests. And inside of that human element, there's an element of corruption. Sometimes people fail, but they are allowed to pass. There are people who don't read one word of English, but they have driver's permits in this country. There are people who don't even go to a driver's test, but they have driver's permit in this country. Bona fide ones, issued by the Transport Division. Those are some of the things that the citizens are all aware of, and we are struggling to put an end to. In fact, I have on my desk for consideration the introduction of that test in other languages. For example, in Indian, or some elements of Indian languages from the Indian continent, of course, because there are many, Chinese, and Spanish as well, because the immigration department in this country, through the Ministry of National Security, allows citizens in here lawfully to work, to live, to enjoy residence. And these people want driver's permits as well. But in English, they have difficulty. There's a whole issue around that, and we want to contemplate sorting that out. I want to touch on the question of diversification. The member for Caroni Central dealt with it. And we understand the need for it. And it is in that regard that the Prime Minister announced that he wanted, first up, and he said it in the budget he paid, to introduce the plywood plant in Trinidad and Tobago. In today's papers, Newsday, Monday, April 25th, at page 17, the headline, Padarat, what of wood factory? The member for Princestown is complaining that the PNM promised a wood factory, and thus far he has not had it. Saying, and he's quoted in the Newsday, that the country has since heard nothing more of the plywood proposal. Padarat accused Dr. Rowley of mamagaing the population with promises that never materialized. Padarat lamented a lack of discussion on the issue of job creation and diversification. He recalled that Dr. Rowley saying on July 11, 2015 on a political platform that the creation of a plywood factory would be one of his first priorities. So the member for Princestown is protesting that we have not put in place the wood factory. So I could give the member the assurance it will be coming soon, and he will get his heart's desire. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, with the few minutes I have left, in conclusion, the question of the taxation of these vehicles, we know that a good and effective public transport system in this country, people would leave their cars at home, it would be better for the environment. We are trying to improve the service at PTSC, working constantly. I just spent some money on buying some new engines, on bringing a Chinese team here, bringing a Brazilian team here, bringing a Venezuelan to repair all of our buses. We have a number of articulated buses that are out of commission. I'm determined to put them back on stream. Tobago reported to me this week that they have seen many more buses on the road. The transport secretary in Tobago confirmed that to me last week. So I'm proud of that. We want to do much more of that. With increasing prices, and we say to the maxi taxi drivers, you don't have to increase no prices. But if you do, you put the people under some pressure. And more people are demanding PTSC service, so we're trying to deliver that. We have cleaned up the bus route so that the PTSC and the maxi taxis could operate more freely. And most of all, in conclusion, Madam Speaker, we have a very ambitious and achievable national road development plan that we are running on. We are building a highway from San Fernando to Mayaro, 2 phases, San Fernando to Princestown, Princestown to Mayaro. We've already gotten cabinet's approval, and we are on the way in sorting out consultancy services for an alignment and for the Valencia to Toko route, a new Maruga road, and we got cabinet's approval for the Waterfield to Manzanilla as well. Madam Speaker, I submit to you, when we do those things, we have improved road transportation in Trinidad and Tobago significantly. For those reasons and more, I entirely support the motion as offered by the Minister of Finance here today, commended to my colleagues in this House as sensible and useful, and all for the benefit of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. May I thank you.
Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you for allowing me the privilege and the opportunity to contribute to these 2 motions brought by the Minister of Finance, with particular reference to the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Act, Chapter 4850, and the amendment to that in terms of raising the the tax on certain vehicles of certain sizes. And the other is the Customs Act, Chapter 7801, and the amendment to the first schedule, Order 2016, which is the Customs Act, increasing the customs duty by 50% on a number of vehicles with varying CCs, starting from above 1999 and above. Madam Speaker, before I go into the details of this as well, I would like to first of all respond to some of the statements made by the member for Laventille West. And one of the first statements he made, which doesn't speak volume for this government, is the issue of the IMF coming into Trinidad and Tobago. And he complimented the Minister of Finance for what he called an ingenious and imaginative and intuitive, forward-thinking decision to bring the IMF into Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, this government had 5 years while in opposition. They said that they had a 2020 vision, then they came with a 2030 vision. And they told the population all sorts of things that how they're going to bring a better quality of life to the people. And the manifesto was there, but it seems as though they have abandoned the manifesto and they're working by VAPs. It seems as though from the inception, the government did not have a clue about what economic policy that they would bring to this country. And they were not prepared to take governance. So the people, the population, are now saying they feel betrayed and they feel fooled by what this present government has done to them to get their votes and put them into government. Because for the last 7 months, we can see no evidence of any economic activity with any purposeful result that would carry the country forward so that the lives of our citizens will be improved. But from day one, the Honorable Minister of Finance seemed to, and the government seemed to want the IMF to come in and give them advice from day one. And the Minister of Finance indicated that they took the advice of the IMF from early on, and they began to impose the advice of the IMF onto the population. So what happened? And what is paradoxical is that the member for Laventille West said that any time the word IMF is always spoken about, people are saying it is a bad word. But this country must never forget what happened between 1986 and 1991 under the NAR, when the boom of occurred during a PNM administration prior to that, and the bust occurred just before 1986. And because of that, the NAR was voted 33-3 into government, because the people were fed up with what had happened in terms of the economic damage that the PNM had done prior to 1986. And when IMF came in, they indicated that there must be structural reforms and a number of things that they began to impose upon the government at the time. That the government, because of the weak financial situation it was in then, had to implement a number of these policies. And it was very telling when the then administration had to reduce the salaries of public servants by 10% and remove COLA and a number of other areas which IMF had said that the government must do at that time. And the consequence of that was, obviously, the government was removed in 1991. Possibly. It's the same thing is happening de novo again. Prescription. It's the same prescriptions they're coming with and telling this country. So when the Minister of Finance admitted that they had discussions with IMF and took their advice from early on, where else are we heading? But it is so ironic that the Honorable Prime Minister just a few weeks ago came into this House and indicated that, with much bravado, that under no circumstance must IMF have a hand in the management of the economic situation of Trinidad and Tobago. And that he will try to keep the country out of the hands of an imposed IMF. He failed. But that has failed. Because here it is, everybody saw the photograph of the Honorable Minister of Finance coming to Trinidad and boasting that he has, the IMF team came with him. Yeah. The IMF team came with him and the World Bank team came with him. So on one hand, the Prime Minister is saying that we want to keep IMF out of the country, and on the other hand, the Minister of Finance is saying, welcome, come with me on the flight and have a nice time in Trinidad and give me advice. Because they are incapable, Madam Speaker. They are incompetent. They do not have the capacity and they lack the imagination to carry this country forward. So they have to rely now on the IMF. And who they have to rely on as well? Also two former central bank governors who had worked with the IMF before and therefore lacking any ability to put anything new on the table, they invited their friends from the IMF to come with them to give them some help. So we have a team here now, the Minister of Finance, two former governors of the central bank, a former permanent secretary, and nothing from the Economic Advisory Board to come to do anything for the government except to give them the advice. And what advice they have given them? What is happening? Let me just state what the IMF report said in March 17, 2016, a press release number 16115. IMF staff completes 2016 Article 4 mission to Trinidad and Tobago. And I quote from one of the paragraphs. Despite the great challenges posed by the need to adjust to energy prices, Trinidad and Tobago still has enormous strengths, including a well-educated workforce and a stable political system with substantial financial buffers and low, albeit rising levels of public debt. And let me just speak about the substantial financial buffers which the IMF spoke about. They have acknowledged that the previous administration had placed this country in a strong economic situation with reserves of over 11 billion US in foreign exchange and over $5.6 billion in the Heritage and Stabilization Fund, coming up to over nearly 17 billion US, close to $116 billion TT. So IMF had to agree that the previous administration, the previous People's Partnership administration under Mrs. Vicessa, had placed Trinidad and Tobago in a strong financial situation. So the ability for buffers is high. But they're also now speaking about the increasing public debt. Our previous Minister of Finance, Senator Larry Hawaii, was very loath to take the country beyond a debt-to-GDP ratio of 45%. And in one fell swoop, this government came in and asked for $50 billion more to be borrowed. And before long, the debt-to-GDP ratio will go close to 70% debt-to-GDP. And we must ask the question, where are we going to be in 2020 and in 2025? What are we going to tell our children and grandchildren? Where are we going? And from the performance of this government, the population cannot see the light at the end of the tunnel. They are anxious to see what the government has to offer. And after 7 months, this government has offered no economic policy to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So what are we seeing? What has the IMF done for the country so far? What advice have they given? Is it the loss of jobs of almost more than 10,000 people? The anguish of people who are, some of, unfortunately, are committing suicide? Increased food prices, increased inflation, increased cost of transportation and the multiplier effect it has, no foreign exchange, increased cost of consumer items, no investment, no foreign direct investment, no sight of any new source for foreign exchange. The manufacturing sector has been paralyzed, no infrastructure development. All these are happening. Why? All these are happening while the IMF is advising the Honorable Minister of Finance and this government. So what advice has taken place? And they speak about the management of the economic affairs of this country. People are asking, what is the government's economic policy? Show us your economic plan. Is it taxation and taxation and taxation? You have none. You cannot tell this country after 7 months that you have any plan. So you came in the budget in October 5th and you told the country the time was too short for you to make a complete budget presentation, 1 month. But you were in opposition for 5 years. And you didn't think that if you win government, you will have to come and do something?
They were linemen.
When we came into government, we had a 120-day plan. And we implemented our 120-day plan with over 90 to 95% success. And our Prime Minister made sure that all her ministers performed within those 120 days. So we can still boast of a 120-day plan. What did you have? You had any plan?
Their plan is to lock up.
Yeah.
Hey, the first man to lock up people want to anything people should lock up.
So the IMF is now saying in their report, and I quote, the new government agrees that policy adjustments are needed. So in other words, they're telling the government these policy adjustments are needed and the government has agreed. So who is running the country? Isn't IMF running the country? So since assuming office 6 months ago, the government has already taken some difficult but necessary steps in the face of sharply lower energy revenues, including widening the tax base. Let me speak about that one time. The Honorable Minister of Finance had indicated that the revenues on VAT will come close to $12 billion. And I quote from the draft estimates of the revenue for the financial year 2016. And we knew the Honorable former Prime Minister was there asking, if you say that you're going to get $12 billion from VAT, show us how you're going to get it. Because we were able to get $5.6 billion. So you need $6 billion more. And he knew he could not have gotten that because he said he's going to reduce the VAT to 12.5%. But then under I don't know whether it was deliberate and did not tell the population, that he was going to remove the zero-rated items from about 7,000 items, so therefore he was going to increase VAT from these. But he said he was going to start that in January. It didn't start until February. And when the country is in economic depression and recession, there is no economic activity, so therefore the amount of money that you will get from VAT is diminished considerably. So when he says that he's going to get $12 billion from VAT, it was obviously the people said that they have fooled them again, because he has not received, and he admitted recently in the midterm budget review that he has fallen short so far by $3 billion. And he is not even going to reach the $6 billion. So how is he going to explain what is happening with the VAT situation? We told him so. And he just ignored us. Or he just felt that there was no necessity for him to listen to us.
Arrogant.
Cutting fuel subsidies. Well, the issue of fuel subsidies is something that has been thrown up for a long time. And in a time like this, where you need to have some increased funding, the thought process on that, we can't have much difficulties in this. And then reducing the number of ministries with a view to streamlining the civil service. This is what the IMF told the government to do at the beginning, and this is where the Honorable Prime Minister says that he is going to reduce the amount of ministries. And the member for Oropoch East never said about the amount of, never spoke about the amount of ministries that they have on their side. So when the member for Laventille West began to speak about we saying that we had, they have plenty of ministries and so on inside it, his IMF has told them that they have to do this, and this is what the Honorable Prime Minister has done. So the people of this country are saying that this country, the Minister of Finance and the government has subcontracted out the country to the IMF.
Oh.
They subcontracted the country out to the IMF. Now, Trinidad and Tobago enjoys the distinction of having top experienced professional journalists who have trained most of the journalists in this country at this time. And I want to just quote from Sunday 24th April 2016 on the Sunday Express what Mr. Lennox Grant said. Amid such stress, Mr. Imbert must have been glad to get away from Wrightson Road.
Listen.
He represented himself in Washington as a Trinidad and Tobago minister, eager to accept IMF and World Bank help and willing to adopt their recommendations for, and I inverted commas, for advice on a number of pressing matters, close inverted commas. He asked for more experts to come to his aid. That was pushing against an open door. The requested experts found seats on the same return flight he took. He brought them up. And the article heads, IMF friends and family enjoy welcome.
Oh my.
So the Prime Minister say we don't want IMF. The Minister of Finance say, come in, enjoy and have a good welcome.
They sat in his lap.
I just want to question your understanding of the 55(1)(b). Please continue.
Thank you. I'm moving away from the point just now, in the capacity, so the IMF is here in the capacity of advisors and fixers, providing preventive maintenance of the TT economy and occupying such a low profile that, like Dr. Hillier and Mr. Williams, they could be taken for family. So welcome to the family of IMF. Welcome to the destruction of the economic situation of Trinidad and Tobago. And welcome to loss of jobs, unemployment, removal of subsidies, and all the negative things that are occurring across the country. So the member for Laventille West spoke about the stabilization of the economy. What part of our economy has been stabilized? Is there an economy? Is anything happening? Everywhere you go, people are amazed. They're saying, what is happening to this government? What is happening to this country? We are going nowhere. We are reversing all the gains that the People's Partnership Administration made during the time. And there's a precipitous decline in terms of the standard of living. And as the member for Caroni Central said, you are removing altogether the middle-class population and you're pauperizing further the poor and indigent population. This is what the PNM is doing to this country. Massive destruction of the lives of citizens of this country. Then the member for Laventille West went on to speak about the party and government had established CNG stations in a number of areas. And he began to speak about the areas. The People's Partnership government built LNG stations in Brentwood and Chaguanas, Peaks, Tacarigua, Ramco, Churchill, Roosevelt Highway, St. Christopher's. City Gate has a CNG station. It was a, well, what repetition of what? You can't even speak, forgive me. People want to know when you speak. Yeah.
Please address, member for Caroni, could you please address your contribution to the chair?
When they look for trouble, they must take the trouble. Yeah.
You're not allowed to speak.
I mean, we have a CNG station right at City Gate. It was us, the People's Partnership Administration, that started to give incentives for hybrids and electric cars. These are my notes. This is my notes. And it was under the Finance Act of 2015. We introduced CNG buses, and 10% of the PTSC is now CNG. Foreign used car dealers now can import hybrid cars up to 4 years old, as we did when our finance bill, in our finance bill of 2015. So, Madam Speaker, when we speak about revenues, and these two orders, in fact, increasing the revenue by 50% in customs duty and 54% in motor vehicles tax. The minister has no ability to tell us how much is going to be generated from there. In fact, the more you increase the pricing of these vehicles, the less people will buy. And this has been said by the Automobile Association. And therefore, what is the net gain you're going to have when you increase the taxation on it, but less people are purchasing them? In addition to that, most of these upscale vehicles are purchased by companies, and companies get back their VAT. And then companies claim their expense under depreciation and other expenses. So therefore, when you feel that you're going to get increased revenue from this imposition, you in fact might be getting less than you originally started. So tax, once they came with a budget, then they said that by the midterm review, they will begin to give the country much more information. Nothing was forthcoming. And before that, they had the ability to tell us a little more under the variation and to appropriation. Nothing was said of any significance. So they had once, twice, 3 times. This is the 4th time an opportunity to tell the country about the economic performance and the way forward. And they are unable to do that, Madam Speaker. Now, nobody spoke anything about the used car vehicles in terms of how it will affect them. The particulars of the tax, Madam Speaker, we know that the new vehicles, the upscale vehicles, will have this tax imposed. But hidden somewhere under the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic, Chapter 4850, number 6, completely built-up foreign-use motor vehicles imported by persons other than returning nationals, 75% of the tax specified in subparagraphs 1, 2, 3, or 4. And subparagraphs 1, 2, 3, and 4 spoke about the 50% increase. So therefore, under line item 6, paragraph 6, completely built-up foreign-use motor vehicles will have an increase of 75% on the 50% increase. So, just as a mathematical calculation, $100 is a purchase for a vehicle, let's say. 50% increase is $50, so that's $150 now. So the foreign car dealers will have to pay 75% of that $150 more. So therefore, the Minister of Finance has not told the population that the completely built-up foreign-use motor vehicles are going to increase in price because of the increase in the customs duty and the motor vehicle tax. You perhaps can speak about that when you're winding up and give us some explanation on that. So I don't know whether this would have slipped the Honorable Minister or his technocrats, because the country is not aware that completely built-up foreign-use motor vehicles, the cost of that will increase as a result of the increase in the imposition of the customs duty and the motor vehicle tax on these new vehicles as well. You know, it is ironic that the member for Laventille West could come back here and speak about 5 years of mismanagement and waste. That is a mantra. And that is a mantra that they have been speaking about for the last number of weeks before the election. And 7 months they come back with the same thing. But as my colleague from Tabaquite will tell you, when you look at all the infrastructural development that has taken place in Trinidad and Tobago, and today is not a time we can enumerate all of that. The population knows it, from schools to hospitals to bridges to roads to every area. And when we look at value for money under the P&M administration versus value for money, and we look at the cost overruns with Napa and Sapa over $1 billion each, and the Tobago Hospital from 150 to nearly $800 million, and the Taruba Stadium from 200 million to 800 million, and this waterfront project from 2.1 to 4.2 billion dollars. So you have no authority, no moral authority to continue to make those empty statements that has no foundation whatsoever. And it's time that you look to see what you're going to do for the country rather than looking back all the time. And they even have the audacity and the temerity to speak of the mass transit system, which they told the population and told the population that they're thinking about bringing back the mass transit system. And they spent, the same Minister of Finance, when he was Minister of Works and Infrastructure, had a goal to spend $545 million on a feasibility study.
Where is that box?
Honourable Member for Caroni, your 50 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes. Do you intend to avail yourself of it?
Thank you very much.
Please
Madam
continue.
Speaker.
That box with that stuff.
And he says the government knows exactly what it is doing. The government knows exactly what it is doing. So, they knew that they had spent $545 billion. We're still paying for it, Madam Speaker. In this financial committee, we showed that we had to pay money for this, the Brian Lara Stadium, the waterfront project, and we have to pay for this waterfront project for 17 years at $256 million per year. Our grandchildren and our children and grandchildren financial state is mortgaged just right here with this alone for 17 years. Yeah, for 17 years. And so the mass transit system, they didn't need IADB to tell you that or whoever to tell you that. You just, the population was fooled. And you knew that it couldn't work. But you want to, and the Minister of Finance was a person then, he said he's looking at whether $20 billion will be enough to bring on the mass transit system. And he was looking into all avenues as far as that is concerned. So let us examine in terms of what revenue is coming to this country. And where is this placed, this customs and motor vehicles tax? And I'm reading from the estimates of revenue 2016. And excise duties, the revised estimates of 2015 was $710 million. And the estimates now for 2016 is $719 million. So would the Honorable Minister indicate whether the imposition of this tax will bring on the $9 million more, or how has he quantified it? Because we believe that, based on his own admission, he has not been able to quantify how many vehicles are being sold, whether it's foreign use vehicles or new vehicles, and therefore cannot give an adequate answer to the revenue that he hopes to generate from this. And when we look at motor vehicles, taxes and duties, Chapter 4850, under the revised estimates of 2015, we had $547 million. And the estimates now is $609 million. $62 million more for motor vehicle taxes and duties. This is the estimates of revenue for 2016, the yellow book, this yellow book. So this is the work of the government, this present government. So where is he getting the additional $62 million from? And therefore, we're saying that you're not going to get this, and therefore you will have another shortfall upon shortfall, because you indicated to the population this is where you're going to get some money, and this is where you're going to get the money, and you're not going to get the money. So when you bring down your expenditure from $63 billion to $59 billion, as you said in the midterm review, and originally in the budget debate you said you're going to have a shortfall of $23 billion because you're only going to be able to realize $40 or $42 billion. You have to tell this country now, Honorable Minister of Finance, what is going to be your revenue for this year, 2016 fiscal year. 7 months have gone and the country doesn't know how much money you have collected, how much you're going to spend, and how you propose to get the money that you want to spend. And then you fatally made mistakes of pegging the price of oil at the beginning of $45 and $2.75 for gas, when you know that the price of gas and oil was going to be way below that, and you had to come back now and peg the price of gas at of oil at $30 and now gas at $2. You pegged the price of gas at $2.75 when gas was about $2.20, $2.30 at the time. So what were you trying to do? You confused the population, and I believe with whether you confuse yourself, Honorable Minister of Finance. So value-added tax, you have $12 billion, and everything under subhead receiver item for 2016, the estimates was 14.27 billion, and that is in the context of tax revenue of 40.798 for estimate for 2016, which this book said that is the revenue that they're going to collect. For income and profits, 23, goods and services, 14, international trade, 2.8, and non-tax revenue, 8.7, from property income, other non-tax revenue, repayment of past lending. And that came up to $49 billion, $49.5 billion in 2016 from the estimates of revenue. We are nowhere close to that. So I would have expected that the Honorable Minister of Finance would have come today to give a broader picture and contextualize this, what he thinks is increased revenue generation by the imposition of these two orders in the context of a wider picture. You didn't do it in the budget debate. You didn't do it in the variation to appropriation. You didn't do it in the midterm review. And today, again, you're treating us with scant courtesy and just coming to pass this piece of legislation. The country demands an explanation of where we are in terms of the finance. And don't hide behind all sorts of things and expect that the country will want to believe what you're saying. They do not. They're treating what you're saying now with scant courtesy and disregard because they believe that they have been misled and they have been betrayed. And the Honorable Minister of Finance was one of the persons when we were in government and he was in opposition who berated the government at that time and the Minister of Finance and called him an OJT Minister of Finance. Well, when the same statement is made in similar circumstances, in terms of the incumbent, people become very annoyed. But that is a perception outside. That's a perception outside. And he criticized the Minister of Finance then and the government for the Moody's downgrading. And there was a big hue and cry, and he spoke for the entire 45 minutes on the downgrade by Moody's. And today what is happening? Moody's has downgraded the country. And he admits Trinidad and Tobago slips a notch. And I read from Sunday, 24th April on the Express again, by Alim Khan, Trinidad and Tobago slips a notch. Exactly 1 week after Moody's Investor Service downgraded Trinidad and Tobago's creditworthiness to one notch above junk. Yeah. 1 notch above junk. That was the member in the opposition when he thundered against the government at the time for Moody's downgrade. But what is happening now? Moody has brought this country 1 notch above junk. Its New York neighbor, Standard & Poor's Ratings Services, lowered Trinidad and Tobago ratings to 4 notches above junk. And the Minister of Finance is saying, it's a good rating, although the outlook is negative. I'm just quoting from the article.
Yes, he's happy to be next to junk.
And in a cut and paste from its December 24, 2015 statement, Standard & Poor's said it is maintaining its negative outlook on Trinidad and Tobago's long-term ratings to reflect an at least 1 in 3 chance that prolonged low energy prices and potentially low growth GDP growth prospects could result in a steadily rising debt burden, resulting in a downgrade in the next 2 years. So we have a downgrade now and expect further downgrade in the next 2 years. And when he speaks about borrowing on the international money market, he knows that the cost of borrowing in the international market will increase exponentially. And he spoke about that recently, where if we are downgraded, the percentage interest will rise. So you want to borrow, but you'll have to pay more for it. So because the financial situation is chaotic. And I want to quote Standard & Poor's, went on to say, successful implementation of timely fiscal reforms, along with a gradual recovery in economic growth, would be needed to stabilize the government's recently growing debt burden. The team, Imbert said, is helping him devise a new oil and gas fiscal regime, a reordered heritage and stabilization fund, a solution to the foreign exchange crisis, and more. This is what you are asking for help. But the people are saying that you are asking for the help for the heritage and stabilization fund because you want to mash up the fund and you want to take all the money out of the fund, which is 5.6 billion US. You said, I remember in one of the presentations here, we say we have the money and that is what it is meant for. And in days of difficulty, you must take it out. So you're going to remove $5.6 billion. So forget this thing you said that you're going to take out 1 billion US in 2016 and 0.5 billion US in 2017. The people are saying that the entire 5.6 billion US is going to be utilized by this government, and you must tell this country what is the PNM's administration and this government going to do about the Heritage and Stabilization Fund. Be open and transparent about it. Don't hide behind anything.
All they wanted, they come.
So, we have a issue here of purchase of foreign vehicles and foreign used vehicles, new vehicles, foreign used vehicles. The minister admitted that he has no information how many new vehicles are being bought in a year. But some information is available. On January 2015, a revised policy and procedures to regulate the fully assembled right-hand drive foreign used car industry in Trinidad and Tobago, 2015 to 2018. Ministry of Trade. The information is here for the Honorable Minister. Number of cars allowed for importation in Trinidad and Tobago, and it gives the years. And the last one they have here in 2012, quota allocation and number of cars, 13,500. And the number of cars allowed for importation in Trinidad and Tobago, 8,684. So the information can be obtained, and this is a document that came out of their government by the Ministry of Trade and Industry. So if you want, I will lay it on the table for you to have a look at, and so you can educate yourself, rather than blunderbuss type of treatment you're giving to the Parliament and to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. The people of Trinidad are confused as to where we are. They have no confidence in what you all are doing as a government, and they know that Trinidad and Tobago is going to go worse and worse in terms of our economic, in terms of the economic consequences, and they feel very irate, they feel angry. And so you said you're red and ready. The people are seeing red. They are angry, and the streets of our country are now being red with the blood of people in Trinidad and Tobago. How unfortunate. Yeah. So, Madam Speaker, thank you for this government.
48.6, please. What blood on the streets of Trinidad and Tobago?
Crime, they're crime.
Is the honorable member
They're crime, they're murders. They're murders. They're murders. It's something that you won't have to take a grasp on, and you have to do something about it. You cannot allow it to continue. So, Madam Speaker, thank you for affording me the opportunity to tell this country that we're in no better position. We are in a far worse position. We were extremely good when we demitted office, and they have taken this country 7 months to bring this country to where it is today. With poverty and the economic situation of the people worsening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to congratulate the members who spoke on this side, the Member of Parliament for Aruka Maloney, the Member of Parliament for Laventille West. I'm afraid I cannot congratulate any member on the other side. Madam Speaker, I have been a Member of Parliament since December 1991. And I must say, in those 24 plus years, I have never heard such rambling incoherence, irrelevant cacophony as I heard today. I just cannot believe that the members opposite attended university and passed their exams. And it's an indictment on our education system. An indictment. Let me deal firstly with a point made by the member for Caroni East, who can't even be bothered to take 2 minutes to access proper information on what the international agencies have to say about Trinidad and Tobago. But like his colleagues, relies on newspaper articles and columns and so on. One distinguishing feature of members opposite is that they are lazy, Madam Speaker. They are lazy. They don't bother to do proper research. And Madam Speaker, I shall now refer, would you stop making noise? Madam Speaker, please.
Members, could we please observe the order with respect to silence when a member is on his legs? Continue.
I sat down here, I heard a plethora of insults coming from the other side. Do so, don't like so. Madam Speaker, don't talk nonsense to me. Madam Speaker, through you. The members opposite are pure and simply lazy. They don't do their own research. They simply regurgitate newspaper articles.
48, 4 and 6, Madam Speaker.
I rule there is no breach of 48.6. And as far as 48.4, that is an expression that has been used by each side to describe the other in this House. Continue, please.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I say, do so, don't like so. On the 22nd of April, Madam Speaker, Standard & Poor's issued a rating for Trinidad and Tobago. And to show you that honorable members opposite do not read, I shall now read from page 3 of that report. And I want to stress, Madam Speaker, for members opposite, because they don't like to read and they don't like to listen. This is a statement made by the Standard & Poor's rating agency about them. And hear what Standard & Poor's had to say. Economic contraction combined with loose fiscal policy during an election year. Economic contraction combined with loose fiscal policy during an election year contributed to a central government deficit in fiscal year 2014-2015. And I repeat, they don't read and they don't listen. We were not in government in 2014-2015. They were. Economic contraction combined with loose fiscal policy. These are not my words. This is S&P, April 22nd, just last week. The underlying erosion in public finances under them was worse as the previous government, them, incurred substantial payment arrears. As a result, net general government debt increased in 2015 and is likely to rise again. The current account balance slipped after being in surplus in the previous years. The government, them, heavy borrowing from the central bank prior to the election resulted in sharply curtailed liquidity in the financial system, reflecting poor debt management by them. And you see, if you were to bother to read, these are not my words. I have never seen an international rating agency be so critical of any government, Madam Deputy Speaker. Never heard an international rating agency being critical of any Trinidad and Tobago government as I have heard this critique, Madam Speaker. That is what the world thinks of them. But you see, they are like ostriches. Their heads are in the sand. They lost an election, and they don't know why they lost an election. It is because you did not persuade the population that you were the right party to run this country. You did not persuade the population that you knew what you were doing. You did not persuade the population that you were honest or sincere, most importantly. Madam Speaker, let me deal with another issue. Regret what? You will be over there for a very long time. Let me assure you, honorable members opposite, you will be over there for a very, very long time. And, Madam Speaker, let me deal with some of these issues here. Let me deal with Caroni Central. Caroni Central tells us, Madam Speaker, that the government is vacillating on taxes. Madam Speaker, I just downloaded, out of curiosity, what happened in 2013 when they increased motor vehicle taxes. There was a similar huge uproar about it coming like a thief in the night, and they gave a moratorium. This is what all governments do, Madam Speaker. They consider when they impose taxes, whether in a national budget or in a variation of appropriation or in any other finance bill, when taxes are imposed, suddenly governments make a decision. They consider whether they will give a moratorium on the taxes or not. Standard practice in this country for 50 years, including several times under them. But they will come in this parliament and pretend that this is something new, that this is something that has just emerged in this PNM administration, Madam Speaker. That is, they are politically dishonest. That is how they are. Politically deceitful people. Now, Madam Speaker, it was my intention to indicate in this debate, and I will do so now, the details of the moratorium that this government intends to introduce, similar to what they did, and the government before them, and the government before them, and the government before that. Madam Speaker, we have taken careful note of how long it takes a roll-on, roll-off vessel to travel from Japan, which is the furthest point from which vehicles come to Trinidad and Tobago. It takes approximately 4 weeks for a roll-on, roll-off vessel carrying cars to travel from Japan to Trinidad and Tobago. I have added another week for customs clearance, Madam Speaker, and another week for registration of the vehicle. And at this point in time, the cutoff date for registration of vehicles exceeding 1,999 cc's engine capacity, when you add the 4 weeks transit time, the 1 week to clear customs, and the 1 week to register the vehicle, that's 6 weeks. If you take 6 weeks from the 8th of April, you will arrive at the 20th of May. So that is your answer. And it is based on science. It is not based on vaps. It is not based on whims. It is based on science. And I consulted and I did my own research. I did not just take what people told me. I checked how long it takes the car ship to come from Japan to Trinidad and Tobago. I spoke to people engaged in the customs and import industry, how long it takes to get the car off the docks. And I spoke to people involved in the registration of vehicles. And that is how we came up with 4 weeks transit time, 1 week to clear the vehicle, and 1 week to register, 6 weeks, taking you to the 20th of May. And that applies across the board. Across the board. There would be new vehicles that will be here already. There will be foreign use on their way, Madam Speaker. And I've also spoken to a number of motor car dealers, and this is acceptable to them. So that deals with that. So using the powers available to me and the government, where the government is empowered to waive taxes on motor vehicles. We shall remit, this is the correct legal word, we shall remit the taxes until the 20th of May. Anything that comes off to go to be registered after the 20th of May will be subject to the new taxes. So that deals with that. And it deals with all those strange questions. How are you going to find out what's going on? Will there be a list? I have never heard such juvenile debate, Madam Speaker. Obviously, the customs will have to do due diligence. Obviously, they'll have to check the authenticity of the documentation presented to them, the bill of lading, the invoice, the ship's register. Obviously, this is done in every country in the world. What is so strange about Trinidad is the Honourable Member for Oropouche East telling me that our customs officials will not be able to deal with something as simple as this. Something that has been done for the last 50 years. Something which our customs officials have to do on a daily basis, check the validity, authenticity, and veracity of documentation presented to them. Are we simply saying that our customs officials are so incompetent that they can't determine whether a vessel, the movements of vessels, Madam Speaker, are tracked by agencies all over the world. They can tell you where a vessel is, what water it is in, at what time it will arrive in the port of Spain. There's databases, electronic and other types of databases that make this information available. This is all known. They were in government. It is shocking that someone would ask how you're going to figure out whether a vehicle was in transit. It is shocking. The vehicle must come on a ship. The ship must sail in the water, and the ship must leave a port and arrive at either Point Lisas or Port of Spain,
Cargo
Madam Speaker.
manifest,
Cargo
a
manifest, a secure system.
Billions
I am
spent.
just shocked at the juvenile nature of the proposals made by members opposite, Madam Speaker. And now let us deal with another shocking statement by the member for Caroni East.
Central.
Caroni Central, sorry. Make me want to give back my university degree. Thank God I attended and passed that university before he was visited upon it. But Madam Speaker, let me just make a point. It is well established, Madam Speaker, that taxation has two purposes. Taxation serves as a revenue-raising device, but taxation is also used to influence people's behavior, Madam Speaker. And I will refer honourable members opposite. I wouldn't bother with Caroni Central because he knows better, Madam Speaker. He may not. I would refer honourable members opposite, those who want to listen, to a paper called Promoting Health, Intervention Strategies from Social and Behavioral Research. And in this paper, Madam Speaker, it speaks to economic incentives and disincentives, taxing and spending powers, Madam Speaker. And I quote, the government has a number of powers at its disposal to create potent incentives or disincentives for changing the behavior of individuals and businesses. The power to tax and spend, Madam Speaker. The taxing power, while affording the government the financial resources to provide services, has another equally important purpose. Madam Speaker, the power to tax is also the power to regulate behavior and influence activity.
Exactly.
Now this is well known all over the world, Madam Speaker. Taxation is used either to incentivize or to de-incentivize, Madam Speaker. This is child's play. And it is shocking that somebody who was a Minister of Planning is not aware of that. That is why you have high excise taxes on cigarettes and alcohol. The purpose of high taxation on cigarettes and alcohol is to de-incentivize the consumption of these things because they are harmful to your health or they cause poor behavior. In the same way, governments all over the world, Madam Speaker, I did a Google search. I got over 2,000 hits on the use of taxation on motor cars to de-incentivize consumption in motor cars. Over 2,000 hits, Madam Speaker. All sorts of learned papers, journals, books in the United States, in Europe, in the Far East on how taxation on motor cars is used to promote the environment, is used to reduce congestion, is used to control human behavior in terms of conspicuous consumption, Madam Speaker. It's there in the literature, but yet I have to hear honourable members opposite tell me the only purpose of taxation is to raise revenue. Where do they live? Do they read? Do they know anything, Madam Speaker?
Would the honourable member give
No, I
way?
will not give way to you. It bothers me, Madam Speaker. It bothers me. They ran this country for 5 years. No one... Madam Speaker, I will crave your protection. I will crave your protection.
Member for Caroni Central, I have warned you during the course of this debate. This is a caution. Please don't let me have to rise again. Continue.
Yes, Madam Speaker. You see, they could give what they can't take. They could give what they... It shocks me that they ran this country. And when another one speaks about the IMF, not knowing of what he speaks, Madam Speaker, this country was forced into an IMF standby credit facility in 1986 for balance of payment support.
Correct.
And one would think, just go and read.
No.
Read and listen and learn. When you enter into a standby facility with the IMF, conditionalities are attached, Madam Speaker.
Without choice.
But the IMF has another purpose, which is to provide technical assistance and support, Madam Speaker. And I am happy to report that all I asked the IMF to do was to advise this country on an appropriate oil and gas fiscal regime in an environment of low oil prices in a mature oil province such as Trinidad and Tobago. And the IMF has experts, and they have already come out. I met with a team of 3 experts today, and already advising Trinidad and Tobago what we should do about our supplementary petroleum tax to incentivize companies and to allow investment by the multinationals, what we should do with a petroleum tax, what we should do with our production sharing contracts. Because over the years, Madam Speaker, there's been an ad hoc approach to oil and gas taxation in this country. We now have a hodgepodge of oil taxation. And what the IMF team is helping me with is to come up with a competitive and equitable and a stimulative policy, Madam Speaker, to stimulate investment and to enhance revenue. What they're in fact coming here to do is to allow Trinidad and Tobago to maximize its revenues from the oil and gas sector while stimulating investment. But they don't know that because they don't read and they don't learn and they don't listen. Chicken little approach to politics, Madam Speaker. And that is all I have asked the IMF to do, to assist me with a view on what we should do about oil and gas taxation. And they're giving me an added benefit. An added benefit, Madam Speaker. They're going to assist me on transfer pricing. Yes. And transfer pricing, how many years transfer pricing is an area of massive revenue leakage where multinational companies charge, be quiet, multinational companies, Madam Speaker, charge expenses in their head office which are unreasonable and thereby deprive Trinidad and Tobago of revenue. So this much reviled and much hated IMF, Madam Speaker, will help this country to design a competitive oil and tax regime which will boost revenue for Trinidad and Tobago and assist us with transfer pricing which will allow us to earn as much revenue as we can from the multinationals, Madam Speaker. And they do it all over the world for countries all over the world. But they are frightening people for absolutely no reason, Madam Speaker. For absolutely no reason. We are not in any standby arrangement, and under this PNM administration, under the leadership of Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, there will be no standby arrangement with the IMF. There will be no standby arrangement with the IMF. And as for the Economic Advisory Board, we made sure to bring as many diverse views as possible because this PNM is all-inclusive. So we have people on the left, we have people on the right, we have people in the middle, we have trade unionists, we have businessmen, we have academics, all together in one creative, beautiful melange, beautiful mixture of all our peoples, people who speak with a socialist bent, people who speak with a capitalist bent, and we will listen to all of them, Madam Speaker. We will listen to all of them. We don't dismiss anybody. We don't chase people away. We don't run them, Madam Speaker. So that is why when Mr. Abdullah speaks, we will listen. But it's an economic advisory board. They merely advise the government. And we've put the best team together that we could find, the best local team, and we will most certainly listen to them. But, oh, be quiet. But, Madam Speaker, it would be foolish of us not to also avail ourselves of the best available advice from the international community, Madam Speaker. You must always have a second opinion, you must always have a third opinion, and then you weigh up all the views and you come up with a homegrown solution, which is what we are doing in Trinidad and Tobago. We are making our own policy by availing ourselves of the best expertise locally and internationally. Something they couldn't do. But they don't have the vision to do anything like that.
For 5 years.
Yes, bleat about transfer pricing for 5 years and did absolutely nothing about it, Madam Speaker. Absolutely nothing.
They don't want any.
Let's deal with climate change. That's another masquerade presented on this parliament by the member for Orapooch East, Madam Speaker.
Typical.
typical political deception, Madam Speaker. I am now going to read, and it's just for them. I'm going to read from the Hindu, an Indian magazine called the Hindu. Paris, April 23rd, 2016. 175 countries signed Paris Climate Agreement. And here what they had to say. That with the planet heating up to record levels, sea levels rising, the pressure to have the Paris Agreement enter into force was palpable at the UN signing ceremony. The world is in a race against time, said UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. The agreement will come into force once 55 countries representing at least 55% of global emissions formally join it. But Madam Speaker, what was really intriguing about this article, Madam Speaker, is that it made the point that 175 countries signed the Paris Climate Change Agreement in New York on Friday, including India. That was what was so intriguing. But I had to hear the Honourable Member for Orapuchi say India signed it in December. And they ratified. It is impossible. It is impossible to ratify a treaty before you sign it. And yes, and he has a law degree. So they say. Impossible to ratify a treaty before you sign it. But he would come and fool the little children who are listening to him and say India has signed it and ratified it. India signed the agreement on Friday, side by side with 174 other countries, together with the Honourable Dennis Moses, proudly representing Trinidad and Tobago. Fooling people! Fooling people! It's shameful, Madam Speaker. It is shameful. And you know what is hard about it? There's an important point in the article I just made. The treaty will not come into effect until 55 countries representing 55% of global emissions join the treaty, Madam Speaker. And it is expected to take effect in the year 2020. But India ratified and signed it already, according to the member for Approach East, trying to bring shame on Trinidad and Tobago. That level of deception is shameful, Madam Speaker. It is shameful.
And he's run every
It is shameful.
You
don't hear? He gone. He ran away again. He knew that what he was saying was not true. He also screamed about ArcelorMittal, saying that this government refused, whatever he called it, this government refused to meet with ArcelorMittal.
Now they would have saved 600 jobs.
I can speak for myself. I, in my capacity as Minister of Finance, met with representatives of ArcelorMittal twice, Madam Speaker, and I reported that to the country, and it was published in every newspaper that I had met with the Steelworkers Union, and I had met with ArcelorMittal on the same day, approximately 1 month ago. And ArcelorMittal had reported to me at that meeting that in order to be quiet, after to rescue that steel plant would cost this country $3,000 million. $3 billion, Madam Speaker. But yet the member for Orapuch is trying to fool some people, will say if they were in government, those 600 workers will still be working today. So what are you saying? That they would have taken $3 billion of taxpayers' money to put it into that? Where Mr. Mittal, the most successful steel magnate in the world,
supplying himself.
Yeah, Mr. Mittal, Lakshmi Mittal, the most successful steel entrepreneur in the world, has decided that he can't compete with China in Central America, in Europe, and in the United States, and is closing down steel plants all over the world. The great Mr. Mittal can't do that. But we would take $3,000 million of taxpayers' money. And he would make that preposterous statement that if they were in government, they would do it. Madam Speaker, you know what he's doing? You know, I feel so heartbroken about what has happened to those workers. And he is using them.
Yes.
He is using them as pawns in his political deception and to spread his hatred, Madam Speaker. And we will have none of it. I want to correct the record. We met with them. Shameful. Absolutely shameful, Madam Speaker. And then now let's go to Caroni East. Let's go to Caroni East. Well, I think I've dealt with them already. The IMF is here to deal with our oil and gas fiscal regime and to advise me on to maximize revenue to Trinidad and Tobago. What? I don't think I have anything else to. Well, he quoted Lennox Grant. You know, and that bothers me, you know. They have no ideas of their own. They have no original thought. They cannot speak for themselves. They wouldn't know an original thought if it hit them in the face, Madam Speaker.
That would require reading.
That would require reading, as my Honorable Attorney General tells me. That would require reading. You know, and the Honorable Member for Caroni is ramble on about the number of vehicles as if he were not listening. I'm not sure if he was in the chamber when I was speaking or not. It doesn't really make a difference because I gave the figures for the number of vehicles imported into Trinidad and Tobago in 2014 and in 2015 at approximately 30,000 per year. I made that point. Yep. It's the same information that is available all in the public domain that he referred to. What is not available, because the customs and the other agencies do not collect the data in this way, is passenger vehicles that have an engine size exceeding 1,999 cc's. That is the information that is not available. There's anecdotal evidence. You can talk to the car dealers. You can figure it out, Madam Speaker, but it is again an indictment on the paucity of reliable statistical data in Trinidad and Tobago. It's an indictment on what the member for Caroni Central did to the Central Statistical Office, right, where you had people working from home, Madam Speaker. They couldn't even have a building to work in. He destroyed the CSO in that 5 years period, and that is why now, and both Moody's and Standard & Poor's, I and the IMF have recognized that he destroyed the Central Statistical Office. So that I, as Minister of Finance now, trying to get an accurate number on the number of vehicles that are passenger vehicles that with an engine capacity exceeding 1999 cc's. Can't get the information as quickly as I would like. I have tasked customs to get it to me. I hope I will get it by tomorrow or the day after. But yes, Madam Speaker, all we got from them was rambling, incoherence, hyperbole, irrelevance, hyperbole, and political dishonesty and political deceit,
to panic people,
untruths, misleading, inaccuracy, deception. That is all I got from them today, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this revenue measure, this taxation measure, Madam Speaker, its primary function, it's a revenue measure, but its primary function, Madam Speaker, is to act as a disincentive. Every taxation measure has a function. Its primary function is to act as a disincentive, Madam Speaker. And I heard them say, we could raise the taxes as high as we want, it will have no effect. Well, I don't agree. If somebody was going to buy a Prado costing 700,000 and now he's facing 800,000, I am sure there are many people who will think twice as to whether they're going to buy that luxury vehicle again. I am certain of it. And if by this measure, we can cause a shift in consumption in Trinidad and Tobago, it must conserve foreign exchange. Members opposite were asking answers whether this thing will help with foreign exchange. Of course it will. If it's axiomatic, of course it's axiomatic. It goes without saying that if you import less. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Your 30 minutes have expired. You're entitled to an extension of 15 minutes. Do you intend to avail yourself of it?
Yes, ma'am.
You may proceed.
And thank you very much, ma'am. I thought the 45 had run out. I feel slightly relieved now. So, Madam Speaker, it's axiomatic that if you import less expensive vehicles, you would have a lower strain or a lower call on our foreign exchange reserves, Madam Speaker. So, but you know, one wonders How can't they see that? How can they not see that? The cost of a Prado is 700,000. The cost of a Hyundai Tucson is $200,000. You can't see that. They're not living in Trinidad and Tobago. So that people may now be moving towards the 2-liter SUVs, the 2-liter cars. I saw a nice Audi this morning, 1.8 turbo Audi, Madam Speaker, so that people would shift towards the smaller cars. They can't see that. They can't see that this will help us save foreign exchange. They can't see it will help us conserve fuel. They can't see it will help us save billions of dollars. The whole move towards electric cars and hybrid cars and CNG powered cars will help us to reduce our fuel subsidy, Madam Speaker. What planet are they living on? And at no time have we said that this measure will not, that those measures with respect to electric cars, CNG powered cars, correct, hybrid cars, at no time have we said this will not apply to foreign use vehicles, Madam Speaker. We have never said that. They are the ones who have put up that straw man to knock him down. You know what a straw man is, Madam Speaker? A fictional character that you throw up, an imaginary thing, and then you throw it down. That's the straw man they put up. For all of the dealers who may be interested, Madam Speaker, I didn't say that. Member for Laventille West, that is not But don't mind, he might be a straw man in truth. But Madam Speaker, the fact is, I wish to assure all motor car dealers, whether they're dealing in used cars, imported used cars, whether they're dealing in imported new cars, the tax measures apply to them equally. So that used, and they are member for Tabakit, I know the member for Tabakit has an interest in this, there are used electric cars, there are used CNG powered cars, wide variety, and there are used hybrid cars that are available. No, and Madam Speaker, let me, since you so happily told me I had that 15 minutes, I saw the look on her face. Madam Speaker, when I went to Washington recently, I was walking around and I saw the showroom with some cars in it, and went into the showroom and they were electric cars, and it was Tesla. For those of you who know about the manufacture of cars, and they have high-end models, and they are bringing out a low-end model. Well, I call it low-end. It's called a Model 3, and it's going to retail for about $35,000 US, about 200,000, a little over 200,000 TT dollars, Madam Speaker. And the beauty about these vehicles, they're warranted for about 500,000 miles. I can't imagine who would drive a car for 500,000 miles. Some of them are 700,000 miles, the big ones. And you have there's no drive shaft, there's no transmission because it runs on electric motor, there's no gears because it's one speed, well not one speed, but it's one engine. And I looked at this and I said, this is the future. I looked at it, I mean not necessarily from Tesla, I'm sure other manufacturers will come up with equally ingenious inventions, but I looked at it, no gas, long warranty, very little maintenance, coming in at about $200,000. And I would urge, it's coming in 2017 or 2018, I believe. I think you put down a 1,000 US deposit and you can get the car. And I urge our dealers, because I heard one of the honorable members opposite in their rambling say about, one of the representatives of the dealers was saying they have to now think about looking at other types of cars. Yes, they do. They must. They must start to look at electric powered vehicles, hybrid vehicles, and CNG powered vehicles, because this same Paris agreement, you see, I know the honorable member for Oropouche get mixed up, The Paris agreement was signed in New York. But he couldn't, but he can't, the comprehension is the problem. It called the Paris Agreement, but it's not signed in Paris, it's signed in New York, right? And when you read the articles, the agreement that all the 175 countries, including Trinidad and Tobago, and I say again, very well represented by the Honorable Dennis Moses in the United Nations on Friday, they are talking about phasing out fossil fuels.
Have to.
And look at the countries like Saudi Arabia. I was sent an article over the weekend. Saudi Arabia is now looking at the Norwegian model, where they're trying to diversify the economy away from dependence on petroleum. Could you believe that? 10 years ago, if somebody said that Saudi Arabia would be trying to switch the economy to the non-oil sector, you would say the person is crazy to say that. But Norway has done it successfully. Saudi Arabia is doing it now. And we in Trinidad and Tobago, we must do it, not just because of oil price. Not just because of oil price, but because of depleting reserves, Madam Speaker. I have to re-emphasize, Trinidad and Tobago is what is known as a mature oil province. It's old. We've been producing oil here for 100 years. We're just like the North Sea in the United Kingdom, where it's becoming more and more difficult to produce oil in Trinidad and Tobago. You have to use secondary recovery. Our gas reserves are depleting and so on. So we, like the rest of the world, have to prepare Trinidad and Tobago for the day, and that day will come. It may not come in the time span of the members of the House of Representatives who are here present, or maybe some of the younger ones, if they stay the course, will see it. But the day will come where the non-oil sector will have to contribute the bulk of the GDP to Trinidad and Tobago, and we have to prepare the population for that. We have to shift people away from fossil fuels. We have to encourage them to use solar. We have to encourage them to use wind power, biogas, and all of these renewable energy sources, Madam Speaker. And this measure has all sorts of factors underlying it, not just to depress constituous consumption, not just to serve as a disincentive to these big cars outside there, not just to conserve fuel, not just to reduce pollution, Madam Speaker, but is to prepare our population for the new world, where fossil fuels and internal combustion engines will be a thing of the past, Madam Speaker. And with these few words, I beg to move.
Honorable members, the question is, be it resolved that the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Amendment Number 2 Order 2016, the contents of which are set out below, be confirmed. Legal Notice Number 47 of 2016-1, Part 1 of Appendix A to the 4th Schedule to the Motor Vehicles and Road Traffic Act is amended in Item 1 by deleting paragraphs D to G and substituting the following paragraphs. D, engine size exceeding 1,999 cc's, but not exceeding 2,499 cc, 37.50 per cc. E, engine size exceeding 2,499 cc, but not exceeding 2,999 cc, 45.00 per cc. F, engine size exceeding 2,999 cc, but not exceeding 3,499 cc, 52.50 per cc. G, engine size exceeding 3,499 cc, 75.00 per cc. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas it is provided by Section 7 of the Customs Act, Chapter 7801, that the President may by order increase or reduce any import or export duty of customs, or impose new import or export duties of customs, and from the date of publication of the order in the Gazette, and until the expiry of the order, the duties specified in the order shall be payable in lieu of the duties payable prior thereto. And whereas it is provided by subsection 2 of the said section, that every order issued under that section shall after 4 days and within 21 days from the date of its first publication be submitted to Parliament, and Parliament may by resolution confirm, amend, or revoke the order, and upon publication of the resolution of Parliament in the Gazette, the resolution shall have effect and the order shall then expire. And whereas the customs amendment to the first schedule order 2016 was made under section 7 of the Customs Act and first published in the Gazette as legal notice number 48 on the 8th day of April 2016, and whereas it is expedient to confirm the said order, be it resolved that the customs amendment to the first schedule order 2016, the contents of which are set out below, be confirmed. As follows: legal notice number 48 of 2016, the Customs Act is amended in the first schedule, A, under the heading 8703.23.50 and 87.23.60 by deleting in the third column the words 40% and substituting the word 60%. B, under the heading 8703.24.90 by deleting in the third column the words 45% and substituting the word 67.5%. C, under the heading 8703.32.50 by deleting in the third column the words 40% and substituting the word 60%. And D, under the heading 8703.33.90 by deleting in the third column the words 45% and substituting the word 67.5%. Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Honorable members, the question is that, be it resolved that the Customs Amendment to the first schedule, Order 2016, the contents of which are set out below, be confirmed. Legal notice number 48 of 2016-1. The Customs Act is amended in the first schedule, A, under the headings 8703.23.50 and 8703.23.60 by deleting in the third column the words 40% and substituting the words 60%. B, under the heading 8703.24.90 by deleting in the third column the words 45% and substituting the words 67.5%. C, under the heading 8703.32.50 by deleting in the third column the words 40% and substituting the words 60%. And D, under the heading 8703.33.90 by deleting in the third column the words 45% and substituting the words 67.5%. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to a date to be fixed.
Honorable members, there is one matter that qualifies to be raised on the motion for the adjournment of the House filed by the member for Caroni East. I now call upon the member for Caroni East.
Madam Speaker, I know that the government wants to get away too. I don't mind. I don't have any objection to postponing. You want me to do it now? I'll be.
I therefore would ask the whip and the leader to just confer and address the House.
Sorry, Madam Speaker, if I may, the whip and I conferred since before 12 o'clock today, and the decision was that we would end at this time and that the motion on the adjournment will be done on another occasion. The whip and I did confer on this.
The whip?
Madam Speaker, I confirm.
Yes, agreement.
Yes, agreement.
Honorable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to a date to be fixed. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to a date to be fixed.